We're going to begin discussing the road to representative government. This is all about establishing government in the colonies. And when we talk about representative government, we are discussing how the people will represent themselves. We begin in Jamestown because this is the first permanent English settlement. Jamestown was a colony that evolved rapidly, and their government had to shift and shape with the ever-changing population in Jamestown. We learned that Jamestown was a boom town, and they had to evolve rapidly with the population changes. Their type of government really began with a council of 7 men who elected one leader or governor. Now, these men and the governor really came together and they discussed having a strict code of laws. A lot of consequences and a lot of problems could happen if you don't follow this strict code of laws. And as you know, the population boomed because tobacco brought crowds. And what's interesting is in 4 years from the time John Rolfe really got Jamestown back into the game, 10 times the growth in population happened. In 4 years, 10 times the growth. So that's like going from 100 to over 1,000 or 1,200 plus in Jamestown. And that was a real population boom here. So they went from, in 4 years, 100 to over 1,200 people in 4 years. So they really had to start developing how to govern all of these people and really take care of all of the business under the strict code of laws. Jamestown established the first lawmaking body in the colonies. In 1619, we talk about the Virginia House of Burgesses. And all that is the first legislative body or the lawmaking group in the colonies. And the first meeting was really just set up the price of tobacco. How much are we going to sell tobacco for? If you're selling it for $5 and I'm selling it for $10, there needs to be some similarities here. So that was really what the first meeting of this House of Burgesses was for, was to set up tobacco. Now, the House of Burgesses and the first legislative body was made up of 22 members that were elected by the colony. And they only met once a year to make laws. Now, these laws that they made could be vetoed by the governor or rejected by the governor. So the Virginia House of Burgesses was really just a simple way to make laws by the people. The people elected these people, and they were the ones that made the laws. In 1620, the Pilgrims landed in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, the Pilgrims were people who made the voyage to the New World for religious reasons. There were two main groups of pilgrims. There were first the Puritans, and secondly, the Separatists. Both of these main groups of pilgrims were here because of problems they had with the Church of England. The Puritans simply wanted to purify the Church of England. That is, they were not happy with the way the king was running the Church of England. And that's right, the king was running the Church of England. They weren't happy with that. And so they wanted to purify the processes and procedures of the Church of England and make it a more pure institution in the colonies. Now, the Separatists were not happy at all with the way the Church of England was going, and so they wanted to totally separate from the Church of England. They wanted to remove themselves from all ties with the Church of England and start brand new, fresh here in the New World. And I hope you hear similarities between their names and what they wanted to do with the Church of England. Puritans purify, Separatists separate. Now, these pilgrims were seeking religious freedom, and so they established the Plymouth colony in Massachusetts Bay. Now, while there, they elected William Bradford as governor. But to do so, they had to all sign, every man had to sign a document called the Mayflower Compact. Now, the Mayflower Compact was the first self-governing document in the colonies, based on the concept of majority rule. So if more than half of the people wanted something, then they would okay it. If less than less than half voted for something, then they would not okay it. And so this document was a self-governing document based on majority rule. A couple years after this was 1639 and the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Now, men of 3 towns in Connecticut were very frustrated with each town being so isolated from others, especially when they had the same values. They did not want to be isolated, nor did they need to be isolated. So what happened was important men all came together and wrote down the purpose and ideas that they wanted to establish a government. And in writing this down, they came up with the first written constitution in the colonies. Now, this constitution stated that people had the right to elect governors, judges, and a legislature. This Fundamental Orders of Connecticut was very important because it was more powerful than some of the other laws that they had created. Because a written constitution written by the people of Connecticut was different than the laws given by the king. You see, they could hold this and have this and refer back to it. And so it made the people of Connecticut follow it even more because they could see it and touch it and read it for themselves. When speaking of representative government in the colonies, you have to talk about religion and virtue and how that contributed to the growth of representative government. You see, virtue is having high moral standards. And each of these colonies or groups that we've discussed all had very high religious ideas and very high virtues. Now, religious freedom was a main cause for establishment of the colonies. And because of that, they took those religious expectations and used those when creating a government. Religious groups such as the Pilgrims, Puritans, and Quakers, and many others created communities that were self-governed. That means they governed themselves. And the Penn Colony in Pennsylvania was an experiment in the possibility of equality and all citizens being involved in the government process.